Hello knitters, this is a special episode here on my YouTube channel where I'll be discussing everything that you need to know in order to knit the Garti Cardi. The Garti Cardi is a knitting pattern by me. It was just released or will be soon, depending on when I upload this video. It's a really big, but I think enjoyable knit. There are a few little quirks and different things about it, so I thought I would share an entire episode just about all the materials that you need, the sizing and the fit of the garment, the gauge, the construction, and any special techniques that you'll need to know. So first off is the sizing and the fit. This pattern comes in 9 sizes and it fits from a 34 to 64 inch bust circumference approximately. That's your bust measurement, and that is also 86 to 162.5 centimeters. The garment circumference goes from 40 to 70.75 inches, and that is 100 to 177 centimeters. It's quite oversized. The pattern recommends 5 to 10 inches of ease. I have a 38-inch bust and I knit size 2, which gave me 9 inches of positive ease. My sample is a little different in that I added some length to the sleeves and the body because I am 5'10". So the body is oversized, but the sleeves are thin. They're a slim fitting sleeve. That's an easy modification to make if you want to have a larger circumference sleeve. You just have to keep knitting the armhole before you join. Keep knitting the front and back separately, and then pick up a larger number of stitches around the sleeve. You will need more yarn to do that though. The materials you will need for your yarn, you will need a lot of leftover yarns. So for this sample I used entirely leftovers except for the edging pieces, these collar pieces, the hem, and the cuffs I did in one color, the color Blackberry from Sassy Strings Yarn Studio in her sock base. So that's a fingering weight yarn. The entire body and sleeves of the garment is done in fingering weight if you are using superwash yarn, and light fingering weight to heavy lace if you are using untreated yarn, wool yarn, and you hold it together. So you're holding 2 strands together for the entire garment. For the edging, you are holding 1 strand single. If you are choosing the brioche option, if you're choosing the ribbed option, you hold 2 strands together. That's because brioche is creates quite a bit of a looser gauge than in ribbing. So the amount of yarn you need for the entire thing ranges from 650 to 1400 grams of scrap yarn. So that's for the entire thing. That actually includes the edging as well. Like I said, my garment was all done in leftovers, so actually this garment didn't cost me any money except for these 2. I bought 2 skeins of this edging color, so it was around $60 Canadian for me to make this garment. You might be wondering how you can use your leftovers to create some sort of a cohesive garment like this one. I do include a separate PDF digital file that talks all about how to manage your yarns and change your colors so that you can try to get the best looking garment out of your leftover stash. So this is it, and in it talks about color arrangement. It is in color, I just didn't print it that way. And I talk about how to arrange your yarns and how to figure out which ones go best with which, and I also did some swatches and took photos of those. So those photographs are actually of these swatches. So in that appendix, I talk about how really you should try and organize your yarn stash by its color value and not its color family. So whether it's light or mid-tone or dark, that's how this one was organized. It was a bunch of my light colors, and then within that group I just moved from the lightest to the darkest, and I paid no attention to what color the actual yarn was, just how bright it was, how light or dark. Whereas these two were done in color family, so my pinks, pinky reds, and blues and greens. So those looked really nice separately. So if you had all of your stash in one color family, that would look really nice, one or the other. But if you're like me and you have a stash of a whole bunch of random bits and bobs and different colors, and some speckled, some tonal, some variegated, then it's better to do it by light and dark, because otherwise when you try to change into a new family, it becomes stripy. Even if you try to go light to dark to light again, you will end up with bands of dark colors and it will look like stripes. That's not my preference. Some of the testers' garments came out more stripy than mine and they still look great. So really it's up to you how meticulous and how detail oriented you want to be for this pattern. And really there's no rules, and if you just want to pick up skeins from your stash, or little balls of yarn from your stash and pick them up and break them and pick up another and break it whenever you want, there's no one telling you to do otherwise. And I think that would be a really enjoyable way to make this garment without a bunch of rules. But if you're like me and you're very particular about what your garments look like, then I do provide guidance in the pattern for trying to get the most cohesive garment out of your stash. The needles you need are 3.5 millimeter, that's a US 4, and 4 millimeter, which is a US 6. So the entire thing is done in the 4. You cast on in the 4 and you work in the 4 millimeter the whole way, and then the edgings are done with the smaller needle size. But of course you should check your gauge and make sure that you are matching gauge. Not only, I don't think you should swatch for this project because you start off with a small amount of knitting here at the back neck, and then you are working and increasing. So I think you should just cast on and start working in a needle size that you think will match gauge, and then measure your gauge as you go. And you can even put your stitches on holders and block it and find out. Because this garment especially, you should continue to check your gauge as you work. It becomes very heavy, and it's garter. So garter, as you can see, stretches quite a bit if it has something pulling on it, which a heavy garment has a lot pulling on it. So if you make a good size swatch like I did, this little bitty swatch doesn't weigh anything, and it will not stretch out like your final garment will. So you might find, as I do, that as I continue working a seamless garment, the weight of the garment pulling on my needles as I knit pulls my stitches larger, and I have to go down needle sizes as I continue to work the garment. So you're free to swatch. Swatching might be a good idea to get a handle on what you want to do with your color changes, but I would not swatch and then assume that the rest of your knitting will match that swatch. This is something that you really should do for every garment that you knit. If you have trouble matching finished measurements of any garments that you knit, you should be checking your gauge throughout your knitting, because there are lots of different factors that can affect your gauge, and they might not all show up in a swatch. For the cords you need, you start off with a 16-inch cord, and then you move into bigger cords as you need them, and you at least need a 30-inch cord, but you might even need to go to 80 inches in order to get the full circumference of your garment if you are knitting one of the largest sizes. Notions, you just need stitch markers, scrap yarn, or stitch holders, tapestry needle, and you might want a digital scale that goes down to 0.1 grams if you're going to get really meticulous about your color changes, especially on the sleeves. Then you'll need a scale to to work that out. So the gauge is 20 stitches per 4 inches in garter and in stockinette. That is approximately a worsted weight gauge. Worsted weight is around 18 to 20 stitches per 4 inches or 10 centimeters. DK is 22 stitches to 20 stitches. So there's a bit of overlap there. 2 fingering weight yarns held together, you should be able to match that gauge. If you're using your scraps, then you might find that sometimes your gauge changes a little bit. Obviously you're not going to be using the same yarn base the entire way through your garment, so you might end up with 2 slightly heavier weight yarn bases that you're holding together so that they actually give you a bigger stitch gauge, bigger as in looser, like your stitches become bigger. I had that experience too. I don't find that it made much of a difference, but you just might want to be aware of that. So the center of my garment is a little bit wider because I started using some of my thicker yarns in here, whereas my shoulders are narrower. So that kind of worked out for me. You probably do want your widest part to be in the middle. But I don't find that it's super noticeable when I'm wearing the garment. Okay, let's talk about construction. Some of the pills on my nose. So this construction is something I came up with, although I'm sure there have been other designers that have done it. From watching other people's podcast videos, I believe that Albina McLaughlin may have done similar garments, and there's a couple other designers that I've wondered whether they've done something similar, but I have not knitted those patterns, so I'm not sure. I came up with it through working the Cocoa Knits method, which is the same as these, or similar to the ziggurat method, where you start a piece of the back, you cast on along the back neck, and you increase along 2 lines for the shoulder. Then you put all those stitches on hold, or you just simply turn your work and pick up along the edge of that, and then you will just work each side, front sides, each of the 2 sides, the left front or the right front, in panels out. For this method, I cast on at the back neck. I increased both sides of these shoulders so that you're simultaneously working the back and 2 fronts up to this final shoulder point, so your drop shoulder point there. Then you have to split, so then you split for your front, 2 fronts and back, and you work your 1 front first, then you work your back, and then you work your other front last. So those are worked separately so that there's a hole here for the arm. Then all 3 sections are joined again to work in the round, and you simply work straight down to the bottom. Ignore the pocket, we'll talk about that later. Straight down to where your hemline will be. However, at the same time, as you are working these shoulders and increasing them, you also need to increase your fronts along each of their edges in order to create a V-neck. If you did not do that, then your cardigan would be in straight panels like this. And you would have an open front cardigan, which would be very nice. There's lots of designs like that, but that's just not what I wanted for this design. So I wanted it to come forward, to be increased along each front so that the fronts meet in the middle. As you can see, when you are increasing along here, then you increase along here at the same time you're increasing along this V-neck side. Some testers had a hard time understanding or being able to follow that way of construction, so I have included some progress trackers at the end of the pattern so that you can mark what rows you have finished and you can keep track of your stitch counts. They also have stitch counts split so that you know your stitch count for each section, so your right front, your back, your left front, and each of the raglan seams. So once you're finished the body, then it's time to do the sleeves. I write the pattern so that you pick up around the armholes and work the sleeves in the round to the cuff. However, personally, I don't like that because I find it's quite, especially this heavy, large cardigan, becomes very tough on my wrists to keep turning it like this and to be knitting with all that weight pulling on my hands. So I offer an option where you can cast on your sleeve stitches and simply work them down in the round to the cuff line, and then you would have to seam your sleeve to the body at the end, which is what I did. The other nice thing about doing it that way is that at the end, maybe you decide that you actually don't like the stockinette side of your sleeve very much, but you like the reverse stockinette better. You can actually sew it so that the reverse side is out, and that's a decision you can make after you finish the sleeve if you seam it into the armhole. The sleeves are slim, so if you do not like that fit, you'll need to make adjustments. You'll need to cast on more stitches or pick up more stitches at the armhole in order to get a wider sleeve there. You could also try to decrease more slowly along the sleeve so that you have a wider section for longer. However, then you would have to catch up, so you'd have to do your decreases a lot more rapidly, or you just have to have a wider cuff. Okay, let's talk about the pocket. So the pocket was something I decided on after the fact, after I completed my garment. So I wrote it as an afterthought pocket. I've included a little tutorial about how to do that, how to decide where to cut your pocket, how to pick up your stitches. You actually pick up stitches for the top ribbing and for the inside of the top pocket at the same time, and then you work a lining in stockinette flat. We want to do stockinette instead of garter because stockinette is stiffer, and so it will hold the structure of your pocket better than garter would. The collar pieces are also seamed the entire length. They are worked separately, so you cast on this small amount of stitches and work it flat. So there's two pieces that you work flat in brioche or ribbing for the entire length of the garment. I'd have to say this is definitely the least favorite part of the test by my testers, which I also found it my least favorite part. But that was really the look I wanted to go for if I had picked up stitches along the edge of the garment and worked brioche or ribbing out this way. The lines of the ribbing would be going horizontally, which would match the horizontal lines of the garter in the garment. I really wanted some counterbalance, so I wanted the lines of ribbing to go vertically to kind of balance out the horizontal lines of the garter. So that's why I did it that way. And it's tedious for sure, but if you've never done brioche before, then you will definitely know how to do brioche flat by the time you are done all the collar pieces. For special techniques, I include a little tutorial on how to hold yarns together so that you don't have to weave in ends. Weaving in all these little ends would be quite terrible. I wove in 0 ends, I just hold yarns together, so I explain how to do that in the pattern. I feel like there's enough seaming and stuff like that in this pattern with all those collar pieces. Yeah, so really it's the afterthought pocket. I do recommend an Italian sewn bind off for the edges of the cuffs and the hem. If you're doing it as a single hem, mine is double, which is another option I include. And in that case, you don't need to do a fancy bind off because you're just going to be seaming it to the inside anyway. But if you don't like to do Italian sewn, or if you've never heard of that even, a regular bind off in pattern is just fine. You just probably want to pick a stretchy one so that it's not too tight on your wrists. As always, I include links for special techniques. So if I haven't done a tutorial, which is probably the case, I try to find one that does show the method that I used or that I recommend. I am going to start a knit along for this garment. I never have done a knit along before, but the testing group was so much fun. Just watching everyone's cardigans come together and all the colors they chose, and people were showing their yarn stashes before they cast on and asking each other their opinions, and it was just a really fun interactive group. So I'd kind of like to recreate that and give you a chance to experience it too. So I will set up a Ravelry group, and it can also be on Instagram as well. I'll try and find a hashtag. I'll put the information below here on the screen, and I will link it below in the description box so that you can find it for when you want to cast on your Garti Cardi. I hope this little video was interesting and helpful to you as you start to prepare your yarn stash to cast on this garment. I hope you love knitting it as much as I did, and as much as most of the testers really liked it. And be sure to tag me because I really love to see your projects. Okay, have a great day. Bye.